All right. Well, hello everyone. Welcome back. Thanks for joining us on day two of the Project Technical Gathering for OpenStack Manila. So yesterday we had a pretty cool retrospective meeting with all of you. We took a lot of action items. We took a lot of feedback from for what went well and what could be improved for this cycle. For this upcoming cycle. So the notes of which I will publish, but the video has already been uploaded to YouTube on the OpenStack Manila channel. Um, I will give you some the links to that channel in the Etherpad in a bit. But with no further ado, we have a really packed agenda today. We will probably get started and keep rolling, um, and we may run over to accommodate the topics in order to like not keep something for tomorrow and uh, disturb the schedule there again. So let's get started. I think with our first topic is a discussion on subteams, and there is an Etherpad for this topic. I'm just copying it over to the other Etherpad, but here it is on chat for all of you. If I can figure out where chat is, there it is. All right. If you aren't used to this, we do maintain two different Etherpads, one for the meeting minutes and one for the planning. And we try not to take notes in the planning Etherpad. That's just a scratch space for us to move things around and gather ideas and stuff like that. So sorry for the confusion about the two Etherpads, but definitely if you want to take notes, I'd highly encourage doing that in the minutes Etherpad. And like you're seeing for most major topics, we might actually step away and do another Etherpad, as in this case there's already another Etherpad for discussing subteams. So at the end of the day, we might make you open a lot of Etherpads. But don't worry, we're actually recording all of these links in our wiki. And if you haven't been there, it is this. There is a page on Manila Etherpads on the wiki where you'll find Etherpads from even older design summits and such. And if there's something missing over there that you created, please go ahead and add it to that list. All right, subteams. I'm not sure I have enough coffee in my system to discuss this, but I'll try to give it a go anyway. So a few weeks ago, Victoria and I were talking about um, internships, the leftover work in Manila UI and stuff, and we were trying to figure out what's the best way to keep momentum on that. Especially because we have a ton of work that like Maury's putting in for the client, for instance, and a bunch of things that we did at the Grace Hopper celebration was client level bugs and stuff. So the idea there was try to get some sort of a work plan that might make things easier. And the plan that Vicky had in mind was to try and break us into smaller groups with focus on each of these individual deliverables. And I mean, thinking about that, that kind of was very obvious because a lot of teams in OpenStack actually do this. And they have separate groups taking care of drivers, separate groups taking care of the UI portion and stuff. And many teams are lucky enough not to care about um, certain deliverables that we care a lot about, right? We have our own UI integration, our own clients, and our own Tempest plugin and stuff. But many projects just have other teams like the QA team taking care of it and stuff. So there's a lot more coordination and momentum with these other projects because they've had separate sub teams that think a lot more about the project than us as a huge group. And that's the kind of learning we got from there. So let me quickly share my screen so you'll see what I'm doing or what I'm seeing as well. Um, can you see my Etherpad window?
Yes.
Okay. So a quick bit of history. We have three separate teams that most people are in some way. We have the core sec team, which is the security team. This is a very, very small group, and I am not sure what the protocol around this is. The reason it is small is because we want to keep a small, vulnerability exposure surface. So when somebody reports a security bug, you want the least number of people to know about it until there is a fix, so we can go ahead and do a responsible disclosure. And a responsible disclosure for many of these security bugs, especially the one we hit 2 cycles ago, is to talk to distributors, to talk to all other consumers, let them know of this vulnerability, and upload the patches and make them available to all of them at once and stuff, so that they can go ahead and patch their systems and things. So this is something that we may not be able to change right now. But there is two other things: the stable maintainers and the core team. The stable maintainers is an inflexible group, as far as I am aware, um, from the time that I've started working on OpenStack. Right, so there is a external stable maintenance team, and they own this group, Manila Stable Maintenance. And at every point, the PTL or somebody from the core team or from the existing stable maintainers team has to approach this external team to ask for other people to be added or people to be removed. So I mean, if you leave it to me, I know that part of becoming core in Manila, we expect you to understand stable maintenance policies. So I think everybody on the third group, Manila core, should be on the Manila stable maintenance team. But we haven't been able to affect that change, so we still go about adding somebody, removing somebody at as the event occurs, sorts. And then we have the Manila core team. And so the ever increasing maintenance burden that's there on all of these stuff makes us want to think, okay, how can we break this up or try to streamline this a little better. This is in the lines of the distributed leadership proposal that was made to the TC in the last cycle, but it's not the same. The distributed leadership principle, proposal is to try and make a project-wide change such that there are liaisons for some sort of some sort of the coordinated OpenStack activities. So if I mean that is a very interesting proposal. Maybe we should take a look at it, but this isn't what we're shooting for here. So what we're shooting for here is, we have had the intention to provide an easy ramp for somebody that wants to join us and become a core maintainer. And that easy ramp is this: that the new person, the existing contributor that wants to be a core reviewer, it works with somebody on the current core team, and this person mentors them as to, okay, I saw this review that you did, here's how it could have been better. Or, hey, why don't you go review this code and this code and this code, so you get familiar with these parts of the system. Or, hey, why don't you pick up this task that the team really cares about, and you get familiar with the whole with coding for that particular subsystem. Or you try and build enough networking to become some sort of a cross project liaison between another project team in OpenStack and stuff. So this is how we have worked with people to become core reviewers, because they've brought in at some point some strength to the table through all of these uh, things that we typically work with. Yeah, we have not formalized this, but we've kind of informally been handling it as a team, and we've done this successfully over the past releases. I've been mentored, I have mentored somebody else, and so on. So my point here though is we create sub teams now such that the mentoring process becomes a little more easier. So I mean, we can get somebody that's working on Manila UI to actually, if they've done enough code reviews, submitted enough code into that project, we give them an opportunity to actually join us as being a mentor. And I'm sorry if that is I mean, makes it sound pompous. It's not. It really is us reaching for your help. If you're not on the core team, to try and help us maintain that project. And if they can get onto Manila UI's maintenance, maybe within that cycle or a cycle later, they actually have enough experience maintaining that piece of software that we could give them the membership into the other sub teams, including ultimately maintaining the Manila server piece, which is, as we know, lot more complicated because of all the moving parts that are there in Manila itself. So that's the proposal in short. Um, I'm sure there are questions, but right now the proposal seeks to create three separate core teams: um, Python Manila Client Core, Manila UI Core, and Manila Tempest Plugin Core. There are some projects that are not covered by these three new teams or the existing old team, that is Manila Core. That those projects are Manila Image Elements, Manila Test Image, DevStack Plugin Ceph, and DevStack Plugin Cluster FS. Right now, the Manila Core team is in charge of all of these projects except the last one, which is DevStack Plugin Cluster FS. But we can talk about that separately. But these projects from line 18 to line 25 are all maintained by the Manila core team. So what I'm proposing is that we split that, create these three new groups, and allow Python Manila Client Core to exclusively be core for Python Manila Client, Manila UI Core be exclusively core to Manila UI, Manila Tempest Plugin Core to be exclusively core to Manila Tempest Plugin. So that's three separate repositories, three separate core groups. And the rest of it, that is Manila Specs, Manila Test Image, Image Elements, DevStack Plugin, Ceph, and Manila itself, be under Manila Core. And while I make this proposal, second part is everybody that's under Manila Core will be automatically copied into these three new core teams. So it's not confusing. We're not taking away anyone's maintainership rights. We're just saying that we're breaking the existing team into four separate teams so that we can allow new core contributors to join us more easily than we have currently. So yeah, that's, I think, the bulk of the proposal. There are disadvantages to this. Disadvantages is a lot of work for somebody like, for example, at this moment, me, right? I need to go create these three groups, three new groups. I need to farm them, catch up with people, try to get them on these teams. And every time I hand over the baton, probably, or whenever I hand over the baton, the next person has to do that. And every time there's a change, that change has to be made in all these four groups. Let's say, for example, one of us decides not to be a maintainer. They need to be fixing all of these four groups on Gerrit and stuff. And the other aspects is we might be creating silos, and this is something that I really fear worse, because I've seen this happen with the other teams. um, I mean, to not take examples, there is another storage project which I mean, which I used to be working on, which was famous for not ever interacting with the UI or the CLI teams or the QA teams and stuff, but they've realized over a period of time that's actually bad for them. And so they've had now some focus on all of these other parts of the deliverables and stuff like that. But this team has never been like that. We've always cared about um, all of this. UI, CLI, and QA as part of the team itself. So I don't want us to regress on that uh, part. We shouldn't be creating something where, okay, let's say Gotham's on all of these teams, but since he's going to probably, I mean, put Victoria on Manila UI core, and Manila UI core is driven by Victoria and her sub team, and Gotham never gets involved with Manila UI core. That's silly. It shouldn't happen. And if that happens, that's what we want to avoid. We really want you to continue to do what you're doing, but we all this is to make sure there are new people that can come in much more easily than it is right now. That's the point I'm trying to underscore here.
Gautam,
And
I want to second you on the fact that um, the already people that is part of the core Manila, we usually we don't have a focus. We try to review things in Manila, in Python Manila client, in the UI, in Tempest. And to be honest, it's like for each of the projects, you need to have different skill sets. Like not
mhm,
everybody is very familiar with Manila UI,
yeah,
for instance, and with Horizon and with the dependencies that we have in Horizon. So having the focus doesn't mean that we should stop doing reviews in other repositories, but we should try to make sure that we don't miss anything on those repositories that maybe we feel more comfortable doing reviews. For instance, in my case, it's the UI or the client. As an example of some of reviews that we missed was, as Gotham mentioned, all the patch sets that Mori was submitting that kind of got reviews like weeks after she submitted changes, and we cannot allow that to happen because it kind of demotivates
yeah,
contributors to submit new changes. So if we have somebody actually monitoring what's going on the client and submitting reviews for those, then it's way easier to get things merged in time and to provide feedback when we get more contributions. But definitely it doesn't mean that like this is going to be my repo and I am the only one submitting reviews for that. And it's like everybody should be participating as usual, with a specific focus on making sure that we don't miss anything on any of the repos that we are monitoring. So yeah, just wanted to add that.
yeah. That's a great point, and I didn't I forgot to make it. What Vicky said exactly happened in the last cycle. For instance, I mean, Mori had a lot of patches that we didn't pay attention to until the very last minute, and we probably made her work nights closer to feature freeze to get stuff done. And that was because we didn't have. I mean, as I mean, our focus is on Manila proper, all of those feature patches that were coming in and stuff. Um, and but if we did have a sub team that was always focused on the client as well as Manila, this would have been avoided because they would have known, okay, here's the priorities for this repo, and here's how we're going to deal with it from this beginning of the cycle. So, any other questions and such? Because I do want to make a couple of other points related to this.
Gotham, I have a
Yes.
quick question. So, for these new sub teams, I don't know if in the past we recorded any of the mentoring sessions or if there's anything to fall back on, but to help make it more streamlined so people can come on board easier and kind of at their own pace. Is it possible to record these message moving forward, the sessions, so that it just takes the load off of the mentoree and mentors.
Yeah. No, absolutely. That's a great question. And I think I was alluding to that a little bit when I was talking about how this was done in the past. So, for example, I hope, I mean, we don't have Jong Jun here. She used to be on the Manila core team a few cycles ago. She used to work for Huawei. And so June and I were paired up in terms of, she wanted to actually help us maintain the project. So I used to work with her one-on-one. And I used to practically tell her everything that I would do. And sometimes I would actually pass on some of my responsibilities to her. I'd say, can you take a first pass look at this? And when she takes the first pass look, I get to see both the code, how much she has done, and then go back to her one-on-one and correct her review style perhaps, or ask her to do something different the next time and stuff. It was pretty informal, but it was happening at a one-on-one level, so we didn't capture or record anything. But I see where you're getting with this, because if we could have some sort of a handbook that we could combine together and make together, saying this is how you do project maintainership, because each one of us is doing different stuff, and that's where our strength lies, right? Because I completely admire the way some of you do reviews, and I'm watching that and I'm learning that as well. And this is another quality that we really want somebody that's coming in to also have, which is do quality reviews, also see what other people are saying, and emulate, and don't even hesitate to correct them if you think they're wrong and stuff. Um, I wish we could write stuff like this down, record it, uh, and I don't know. That's probably something that we can take as as a suggestion, reader. For now, I don't think we have any recordings, any sort of material like that. We've discussed in the past that we'll do mentoring, and we've done it to some extent. That's kind of how it's
Yeah.
worked out.
And I mean, I don't mean to like record every session, but some of the fundamental stuff that don't change and doesn't need to be updated, because the maintenance part of this whole training and mentorship
Mhm.
can be kind of hairy as well if we start documenting it. Like Mari has that document right now on the client UI, has she installed the environment, dev stack, and so forth, which
Mhm.
is really very, very helpful. But obviously, in future it may need to be updated. So there's a clear line, but some of the fundamental stuff, not to, overload people with sessions and documentation. Um,
Yeah,
that was just self thought.
no, you're right. And we can get started on something like that. Absolutely. How to be a responsible maintainer. I think there is one document for all of OpenStack. I don't know whether we have any in the Manila team, a meta document like that. Um, so we'll definitely address that. Um, I'll try to frame an action item around that, but it would be something collaborative that I'll lean on the rest of my team for. Um, I didn't want to derive from what Vicky does, what Carlos does, what Douglas does, what Tom does, etc. So I mean, I don't think we're in any way uniform. We're probably doing unique things, but maybe there are common things that we can pull up and make a document out of. Let me do that. Let me start an Etherpad right after this, and we'll start gathering ideas and then make a document like that. And then you can tell us if that's helpful and if you'd like some more stuff.
Perfect. Thanks,
Awesome.
Kappa.
Yep, you're welcome. Any other questions regarding this? Any objections or statements of support or indifference?
I can support this.
Awesome.
Me too.
This way I can be a mentee and the UI and an average person on the core, So good. If I
No, that's
don't know
actually cool.
anything,
Yeah. No, that's a great way of putting it, Tom, because that's exactly what I meant when I was talking about, Victoria leading Manila UI sub team, because I have lots to learn in that space. So that might give me the opportunity to think like that, especially if I start, talking to Vicky or day to day on, hey, how's Manila UI going, etc. How can I help and such. Might be everybody's experience there. All right. So the second part of this, I don't want to just start these teams empty. I mean, like I said, all of these teams will have the existing core maintainers team added to them. So all of you are going to be part of Python Manila Client Core, Manila UI Core, Manila Tempest Plugin Core, if you've been part of Manila Core. But we've recently started talking, for example, that I mean, as you know, I mean, how these sort of discussions go, and I want to be pretty open to all of you, and I don't want to put anybody on the spot. We've been talking to Maury to try and join us on the Python Manila client core, and she's a perfect example of all of this, right? I mean, the idea was Victoria and I spoke to her with the thing saying, join us for Python Manila Client Core and see if you like what you're doing. And we want you to start building your skills so that you can do um, all of the projects like, Manila Core and stuff. So that's you will probably see one of us pulling the trigger and proposing that in the mailing list. But this is where this discussion also branched out into, and we're extremely happy Maury has agreed to do that. And just the other day I got an email from Hikeseen and Bryn at Inspur, and they are interested in doing something very similar. So I was telling Hikeseen that we would probably try to get you paired with a mentor, and just get you where, let's say, for Maury is, for instance, if Hikeseen is interested in one of these three teams to begin with, maybe he can start collaborating with somebody in these three teams, and then get on to becoming a core maintainer for these teams, one of these teams or multiple of these teams, and then within this cycle or the next cycle, he might be on Manila core. And I would like to extend the same invitation to Leron and Vida, who have been focused on Manila Tempest plugin core. Come help us. If I mean, you actually know the code base. You've been working quite a lot on this stuff. You're capable of actually performing high quality reviews, knowing that space. So come help us maintain that, and then probably let us know if this is your intention to actually be part of the whole maintainer team. We'll try to get you on the other core teams and then Manila core itself and stuff. By no means when I'm saying that this is some sort of a the only way to go about it. If you are, if you are interested and motivated and you're doing reviews and actively adding code, etc., or even documentation, any part, right? If you're helping us out and your intention is to be on all of these core teams, by all means, we don't need to stop you by saying, come first be part of Python Manila Client Core, Manila UI Core, or Tempest Core, and then be Manila Core. That's not what I mean. But I'm saying if this is the path you choose, if this is easier for you to gain the ropes, I'd encourage you to do that as opposed to shooting for Manila Core, because we know that getting there is actually a lot more painful because of how complex the Manila project is, and your familiarity with different parts of that code. Does that make sense? And I hope I'm not like confusing you.
Gotham, I think you guys picked, Victoria, and you picked the right theme, sub-teams.
Yeah,
It's a complex project. You break it down into sub, so that makes a lot of sense.
awesome. All right. So are there any questions? I know we've gone over. Sorry, this was meant to be just about 15 minutes. Um, uh, Haixin, I've captured everything that I was speaking about in that Etherpad. Uh, so if there is something missing, I usually go back and add notes from the recording and stuff. So I will do that, and I will probably send you a note today that this Etherpad is complete for consumption and stuff.
Uh, I I just understand a part of what you said.
Yeah.
My hearing is poor. So I think I want to see you write something in the pad.
Yeah, and I will do that. Thanks for letting us know, reminding me. I'll take some time maybe, and I'll fill up the Etherpad. If anybody else has can help me as well, please go ahead, and I'll thank you for that. And you can look at this Etherpad Haixin. That's going to capture whatever we spoke, but in text.
Hey, Gotham, can we make a quick stop here? I wanted to just say that we have Dina on our call today.
Oh, yep.
She's an origin applicant for Manila UI. I wanted to say hi to her and welcome. And well, she will be sitting with us hearing on, well, how we work on features and bug fixes and planning in general. So yeah, welcome, Dina.
Absolutely.
Uh,
We're
thank you. Also, hi to all of you. So nice to meet you, and hopefully I'll be working with you.
Yeah.
So I already made some contributions, and then just thank you for welcome.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for joining us. And I mean, we barely see, outreach interns joining this sort of a project call. We hope it's going to be educative. And thanks for joining.
Thank you.
Feel free to speak up if you have any thought or idea you want to share with us. This is the whole idea of the project team gathering, actually, to take some features, some enhancement we need to do and discuss on them and provide ideas and to discuss with the whole team. So you are more than welcome to share your thoughts and well help us make Manila great.
Okay, thank you. Once I'm just getting this idea how all this works, getting familiar with the project. But thank you, and hopefully I will be able also to contribute some ideas.
Awesome.
Great. Back to you, Gautam.
Yep. No, thanks, Vicky, for letting Dina know about this and having her join us. Great. So I think that's all for this topic. Any other further comments on this? I didn't hear from a lot of you, but if there's anything that's bothering you, do let us know. Even if it's something that you want to let me know in private, and I can help you work that message, and then we can talk to the rest of the team. All right. Great. So let's move on to the next topic. I will just stop sharing just for a second and do some administrative stuff here. All right. The next topic, we're starting roughly half an hour after we planned it. So we are running late. Oops. All right. The next topic is Hyaxine and Douglas. We'll be talking about if all backends are down, the status of the share will be stuck extending when we extend a share. So do either of you want to start about what this issue is and why we're talking about it?
Uh, about this bug, I think I will I think about it today again. I think it is better to use reserve the extend percentage, and we better add it to Manila. Then the scheduler will use reserve the percentage for create new shares, and use reserve the extend percentage for extending uh, exciting shares. Uh, I I will continue to fix this bug several days later.
Okay, so the bug was opened because there's a problem that when try to extend today a share in the on the share service that holds that backend is down. So this share will be stuck on standing state, and Hashin wants to provide a fix for that. Uh, it was discussed in the past PTGs, and I can see two ways of fixing that. One way is the one that Hyson is proposing, is that we should go through the scheduler, and the scheduler will take a look on the share service status and see if it's down before actually extending the share. And also the scheduler can also uh, see if the extent of the share is possible due to the free space on that backend. And this is one approach, and Haitink already provided a patch for that, and we have some discussions on this patch. Uh, I think that the point that we left was the discussion if we can continue to have the both both paths, because today when the extending a share, the operation goes directly to the share service, and this is the way that was designed in the past, and there's a lot of ground that were created or were planned based on these design in the past. And the idea behind of going through the scheduler is also to have the option to continue to have uh, another path that is going directly to the share service. So the point that I was raising in the Garrett in the review was to have both both options, and we can let the administrator choose if he wants to go to the to extend the share, or if he wants to go directly to the share service as the way that we have today. If we uh, if we change the code to have both options, we still can, in the API, check the status of the share service to see if the share service is up or down before calling calling the share service or changing the status to extending. So for both ways, we still can fix the bug. We can still check it triggering the extend. So I believe that the part that we are today is that we were asking, I think, if we can have both options on his implementation. And I believe that I'm not sure if we got a consensus in the Garrett review, but this is the point that I'm trying to raise with my questions there.
Awesome. So I think I was taking notes of what you're saying, and also asking questions along the way. Um, so you're saying don't uh, put this through the scheduler at all. Allow, perform a service check before you invoke the scheduler. So it solves Hyaxine's bug, which says if when the share service is down, it the share is just stuck in extending. So that's one option. Although there might be some issue with that. One is if we basically deny that, we could deny that saying please retry, so that we will allow that operation when we have an operational shared service. But the idea here is also that if the share service is down for a few minutes, or even this thing, the message is not lost. The message is lost only when the RPC message is lost only when the share service consumes the message and then goes down. So a new share service that comes up should be able to pick up that message that's pending, and perform the operation. Was the original design. So if we start performing service checks, this isn't the only API that talks directly to this share service, right? We might have to do that even for other operations. So that would be one thought around that. The other thing is what is really wrong about the scheduler, giving us let's say the scheduler disallows extend. What really happens? What is the failure state that we're putting the share into? That's question number one. Second is, are we using the full scheduler and causing ourselves more pain? Can we not just use the capacity related scheduling within the scheduler? Because I think the concern here is also that if somebody modifies a share type after the share has been provisioned, and let's say they modify a capability, and the existing backend that the share is on does not satisfy this capability, then you've unnecessarily caused an error in the scheduler, because you're also considering capabilities when actually all you want to do is extending the share. So that seems wrong uh, as such, because I don't know how to put it, because besides capacity, I don't know what else can be useful for share extensions in the scheduler.
Yeah, I
That
think
makes
that only
sense.
capacity. I don't recall what the status that the scheduler is moving the share when the extend fails. I think I don't know if Haishin can give these info. I don't remember just looking to the code.
Yeah, we can definitely do that.
Uh, now, n- now I found the failure schedule is um, the schedule of share while keeping uh, uh, ex, while keeping extending uh, all time um, if the backend has done.
Yeah.
If we go through scheduler, we can make a rollback, return the schedule of share to available. This will help user to use this share uh, uh, yeah, that's
I can see here in the code that the scheduler is sending the share back to available and sending a user message uh, notifying that there was a error on extending the share. And there's a proper user message for that. Probably a new one.
And that sounds right. I think we don't want to put that share in any bad state, and then that if that happens, then we probably don't care about the capabilities check, is it? No, we still do, right? We still want. I mean, we don't want to consider things that are not going to be consequential to the extension itself. So we don't want to consider capabilities in the scheduler and whatever else. It needs to only be a capacity-based decision. So if I don't know if we want to go down that path and explore a way to um, select what filters apply and what weighers apply just for this extension. That would be concern one. The concern two is addressed, which is make sure that the share is set back to available and stuff. So concern three, this is something that I'm interested in as well, which is if there is no space in the backend, the scheduler is telling you you have no space in the backend. You've oversubscribed your backend, uh, let's say, and that's one of the reasons why you think that there is actually space in the backend, but the scheduler is going to disqualify extending the share. Should we allow this? I know this is the
So
existing behavior.
if I understood Douglas, he was suggesting a configuration option to
Yeah.
allow that for administrators who want it. I think he was saying the configuration option would just go directly to, it would bypass the scheduler checks and go directly to the back end. But another way to implement that would be to always go to the scheduler, but have the scheduler not disqualify for lack of space, but only disqualify if the backend is not responding and not, not up. I don't know if that would meet the use case Douglas has or not. So it wouldn't be scheduling, but the scheduler knows whether the backend is reporting, right? So if the backend is not reporting, it could do an early failure, even in the case where you want to use the administrator says, I know what I'm doing. I don't want the scheduler making a capacity decision for me because I want to be able to extend. I'm sparsely provisioned and I want to be able to extend the volume anyway. So we'd be using the scheduler as an aliveness check on the back end and as a way to get the graceful failure and return to available state like you just described. And normally, I think we would also be doing a capacity check only. But in the case of administrator who's used to being able to go directly to the back end and ignore the capacity check, they could still have that behavior if they set a configuration option.
The reason I'm a little whatever about the config option is how do you present it? Like in the sense, it's going to become a global configuration option if should it be a scheduler option. And maybe you have 3 backends and you've oversubscribed one of them, but then now you're ignoring the scheduler decision for the other 2 backends where it doesn't make sense.
I hear you. And is that true even if the configuration option is used to skip going to the scheduler altogether, as Douglas had suggested?
That's true
I
even
think
then.
so, right?
Yes. So I mean, can we consider actually extending the API instead, to say, I want to force extend the share. Don't go through the scheduler. I mean, just go send it to the share service, and if it's down, it's down. But since I'm the privileged user, I'm going to force this operation and see what happens.
I kind of like that. What about you, Douglas?
Uh, I'm also okay without that option. I just I would like to see an option that is very similar what we have today, and not if an administrator updates the Manila and he faces a totally different behavior when extending a share. So we can give an option of going through the scheduler, but this will be an additional option, an optional operation that admins can do. I'm just worried about someone updating his environment, and the extend operation is totally different.
It's not though, right? Like we're only covering the corner case of extend where you are out of capacity. Otherwise, this would have failed at the share driver. The driver
Uh,
could have realized that, hey, I don't have space. This extension is going to fail anyway.
Actually, this depends how the scheduler will filter this backend when doing the capacity check, because uh, we can consider that we have different capabilities on the scheduler that may skip or may uh, block the share to be extended if doesn't have the space, but actually it has a reserved space, for example, that the admin can use to extend the share, but the scheduler will block because that backend has a reserved percentage
Yeah,
configured at some point. So it's different depending what the scheduler will do.
that's a good point. So yeah, if you're doing oversubscription, you have to consider reserved space. I mean, and you're probably going to do that right now because reserved space is one way to get the thin provision shares to organically grow over a period of time. But were you reserving space for extensions? Now that's a gray area that we didn't write down as a possibility. Yeah, I understand that's probably what deployers are doing today, reserving spaces just to cover share extensions as well. And yes, the scheduler will disqualify that because reserved space means reserved space, whether you want it to um, be for a new share or for a share that's getting extended.
Uh, this is just an example of what the behavior will change after
Yeah.
we doing that. But regarding the config option versus the new API parameter, I think that I'm okay with both. I believe the API give more flexibility at least. So I have a question about that. Should be the scheduler, going to the scheduler, the best way to fix as this bug, or should we face that as a new feature now that we are considering maybe a new parameter, and a partial fix could be just before sending to the Manila share service, just check if the service it's up and running, so we will avoid shares to be stuck on standing, at least in most cases.
are on mute, Gautam, if you are talking something.
Yes, I am. Sorry. Thanks. So this isn't a bug fix that can be backported, even if we were not to make an API change. I mean, it definitely changes the behavior, like you said. So we don't want to regress behavior in an older branch. Um, I actually don't. I do sympathize with the cause that it might be breaking for some corner cases, but at the same time, I think this is obvious. We made a mistake when we didn't do this the old way, that is through the scheduler. Um, so it kind of makes it feel like we're correcting an older bug, and I like the approach that we're taking now. And we may be able to call, to do documentation and whatnot to suggest that, hey, if you're running out of capacity, the scheduler will prevent you from extending shares. You have to use this new method to extend such shares if you really want to force the behavior. But we think of all the other cases that you're solving. You're talking about the health check of the service. You're also talking about backends that are now not going to fail checking for capacity during extensions, and any other further capacity based decisions that you will add to the scheduler itself. Whether it, I mean, all the existing capacity checks as well as any in the future. So if we delay this decision, or not make this change, we might be putting ourselves into a deeper hole.
Yeah, I'm not sure if someone else has an opinion about that.
So, I mean, playing out the worst case though, Douglas, if we did make this breaking change, behavior change, and someone's automation or existing behavior changes, and they didn't read the documentation, their shares would be back to available with a user message that says you have no capacity to extend this share or something like that, right? The capacity filter has failed your extension. So then they would have to go ahead and talk to a privileged user to force this if they think this is necessary. Do you think this is going to break somebody's workloads? Because the other side of that is that sort of an extension could have failed at the driver.
Yeah.
So even if you force this, there's no way to know that it's going to work. It's something that the driver is going to check and maybe fail again.
I don't think that's the end of the world, for sure.
Yeah. Okay. So any other further thoughts on this? Because I want to actually wrap up soon. We have discussed new points now, and I want Haixin to take this back to his review, consider these, and yeah, that is the conclusion. Thanks for adding that note. I that's Haixin.
Uh, we discussed the result is we better to add the force parameter to the extend API and let user choose whether go through the scheduler.
Not the user. We might put a policy on that. It could be the user in many clouds. Maybe we will put a policy on that force extension, and by default, the policy would probably be to the project administrator. Because we really think this is a corner case. It's not every day that you're going to run out of capacity when you're extending your share. And we think these guardrails should be implemented for the normal case. And an administrator by default can force it. And if somebody has a cloud, let's say that is fine with this sort of behavior, they will go ahead and modify the policy and allow anybody to be able to extend shares. Does that make sense? So we'll be needing a new policy as well to use this flag.
You speak too fast.
Yes, I do. I'm
can't
sorry.
understand.
Yes. So let me go back to the Etherpad and type that out, but I don't want to hold the rest of them. We will take the questions for this again. I will type it out in the Etherpad, and we can answer questions there.
I want you can write your key points in the pad.
Yeah. All right. Let's get back to the main Etherpad, and just give me a second. The next discussion up here. Thank you, Victoria, for keeping the PTG bot up to date. So we were supposed to start 10 minutes ago for the next discussion, but I want us to take a short break before we can get there. Is that fine, Tom? Okay, so we'll take a short, let's say 10-minute break and get back here at 15:20 UTC. Is that good? Less than 10 minutes.
15:20 PC.
Awesome. Thank you so much. We'll be picking up at 15:20 UTC.
Sounds good. Thanks, Gautam.
Thanks, Vicky. All right, welcome back, everybody. Hope you had a great long break. So we're talking about VirtIO-FS, and this is something that Tom's created a new Etherpad for, so that's where we'll be taking this discussion. The Etherpad is on the link in the meeting minutes, and I'll just place it in chat in a second. And Tom, it's all yours now.
Thank you, Gautam. So we are thinking about using VirtIO-FS, which we'll describe in a moment, in concert with Nova, so that Nova can, I'll use the word attach Manila shares the way it can attach sender volumes. And so one would, in the Nova API, when you boot a VM, by the way, this could take a different shape depending on what you guys tell me today, but I'm just giving you my concept of it, current concept of it. When you boot a guest VM in Nova, a compute instance, you could indicate that certain shares would be there for it. You could also attach and detach shares from a running VM the way you can with sender volumes. Now, the motivation here is, at least on my part, less to be like sender, even though I joke sometimes, since we're a spinoff project, about what would sender do, than to solve these use cases that I've indicated below here. And you guys may think of others, or if they don't make sense, please let me know. My objective today is really to make sure that that we understand what the proposal would be, and to get a feedback from the Manila team about whether you're kind of okay with us pursuing this with Nova on the one hand, to get a sense of what we need to do on the Manila side. And 3, get help with how to present this to Nova and make it something that they want to do too. As I think you'll see, it involves, at least as currently conceived, involves a lot of changes in Nova. So there is I'll call it crudely at the moment, a sales job to be done with Nova to get their buy-in and acceptance and enthusiasm on this. Okay, so the use cases I have here are, and please interrupt me at any time if something doesn't make sense or if you have a thought that you want to share. That as a regular user of OpenStack and a user who boots up Nova VM, so as a Nova Compute user, you want to be able to boot up guest VMs with their file shares from Manila, just as you can boot a guest from Sender. You want to be able to attach and detach a file share to a running VM, just as you can attach and detach a block device. And now we're kind of getting to the things I care about most here, that for these operations, you don't want to have an extra network interface on your VM to a shared storage network, which is at least with the number of backends today as we implement them, if if you don't have a fancy backend that can do driver handle share server true in combination with setting up networking directly onto a self-service tenant network, then today you need some trick, routing or NATing or an extra NIC or something that puts you on a storage, gets you to your storage backend. Similarly, you don't want to have to install or manage, take responsibility for extra software. There also, we want this to be secure. There should never be any question whether my compute instance is involved in any kind of compromise or damage to the storage infrastructure or shares belonging to another user. And you shouldn't have to know or manage extra credentials or keys beyond what you need just to work with OpenStack. So no CephFX keys, no special secrets, no special clients, no extra client packages. And you are, since this is a file share, going to have to mount it still in addition to getting it attached. But you should be able to use a simple mount command, and it should be the same no matter where your compute instance ends up in the, no matter what compute node it's on, no matter where it's scheduled or where it's migrated to or reincarnated on or anything like that. A non-requirement for this iteration, at least, is being able to boot from the shared file system. We boot from volume, we boot from glance image. We might want to look at that someday, but it's not a compelling use case for what we're doing, and it introduces a whole lot of extra complexity in Nova. And honestly, I don't want to suggest that we go in there proposing it. I think of it as something that we should look at as we go along on this iteration, so that we can maybe not paint ourselves in a corner relative to doing that in the future if we want to. I think it's going to be complicated and challenging enough just to do non-boot volumes, shares as volumes. Now, as an OpenStack cloud operator, we want to be able to offer shared file system services to users without us having storage networks to to the VMs themselves. So in other words, you're going to run the storage network to a compute node, but not to the guest VMs. You want to avoid the deployment complexity and HA challenges and scale out limitations that come with using protocol conversion gateways like NFS Ganesha. And you want to be able to deploy share services in edge scenarios like little 3-node edge clusters that Sunder is talking about and Glance is talking about, where running pacemaker-based HA like we do now with Ganesha is unsuitable. I probably need to get in these use cases something explicit about SFFS since it's the dominant software-defined backend right now. But basically, running SFFS today, native SFFS requires that guest VMs be trusted to interact with your storage infrastructure, both in the sense that there's direct network access to the Ceph public network, so that you want to make sure the guests aren't compromised and have software on it that's going to mount a DOS attack on the Ceph daemons or something like that. And because SFFS requires a trusted client. It delegates responsibilities to the client for performance. It delegates stuff like backend quota management, which is the enforcement of a Manila share size, the way when you use that backend to the client. So if you have an untrusted VM, you're not going to know that, for instance, CVEs have been addressed, software is up to date. You may not even know that it hasn't been compromised or deployed properly. So these are the use cases that motivate VirtIO-FS in my mind, or use of VirtIO-FS. Maybe we should pause a moment and just check with people whether these, we articulated them, whether it makes sense, questions about it, and stuff like that.
So I was making some notes there, Tom. Just want to point out that for some of the backends here, this might actually provide a level of security that DHSS-True was providing. That was the bigger challenge, to get storage backends integrated into Manila, because initially Manila required that everybody provide access to share servers and stuff, and we removed that requirement and we added this mode that said that conveyed to the end users that you are not going to get hard network and data path guarantees for multi-tenancy. But with VirtIO-FS, if it makes no difference if we were to use DHSS true or DHSS false, because these are hypervisor mediated connections, and you have no access to the hypervisor as a tenant. You will just see the storage show up, but nobody else should be able to access that, just like you don't.
Right. And I think as I was drafting this, in many ways, I'm thinking about the Nova team, because I'm rightly or wrongly, I'm thinking of them as the biggest challenge on this right now. But yes, from a Manila standpoint, and we certainly want to say this, it lowers the bar to having strong multi-tenant separation. So tenants are separated from one another as well as from the storage infrastructure. So obviously, if I have a fancy, expensive backend that can do DHSS equal true, and I have it's networked well into my OpenStack cloud, which may mean things like I'm doing VLAN to VXLAN translation with an expensive switch or something like that, then the problem you're talking about is already solved. Tenants are separated well. And with backends like that, you have pretty safe, even if they have direct access to the storage in some sense, they're just doing REST calls or something like that. So it's pretty good. But this lowers the bar to get the same kind of separation with cheap software-defined backends that can't do DHS equal true. Am I getting your point, Gotham?
Yes, you are. And further point is Manila's own interactions, right? So mount automation has always been on the top of our heads because so for you to use a shared file system, you're going to create your share in Manila, create access rules for every VM or bare metal or container that you want access to, or you really don't care about the access rules. You just go ahead and allow an entire subnet or set it to 0.0.0.0/0 or something like that if you're using NFS and such and stuff, right? So you don't have to meddle with that from the way from what Tom's proposing. If Nova were to do that for you, you don't need to query about access control to Manila um, when that happens. So it simplifies your workflow.
Yes.
You're going to see that share show up as just as you say, Nova share attach or something like that, whatever we decide that is.
Yeah, so Gotham or anybody else, feel free, Gotham is, and thank you, add stuff here as brainstorm for use cases for this if you think of things. So the proposed change to answer these use cases is that the new VirtIO-FS support in libvirt and QEMU would be leveraged by Nova so that it can create and update VMs with file systems, so that they get a shared file system between guest and host that is sandboxed and secure. There are references at the bottom. You can read all about it, but it uses a Fuse Plus protocol with a kind of reverse trust model. So the kernel handles IO calls in the guest, and it gets directed to a VirtIO-FS on the host. But VirtIO-FS is smart and works with shared memory and this DAX access so that there's no copying to speak of, and that guest file system caches are bypassed, and you're reading and writing directly into the host system's file cache. Now, this is a local file system sharing setup, and it could, in theory, be leveraged by a remote file system like CephFS to work directly with that file system, but nobody's written any software like that. So we're proposing right now sort of two stages to it, which is that on the compute node, you would do a remote mount of a CephFS share, NFS share, CIFS share, whatever. And then you would use VirtIO-FS to expose that remote share to the guest and get this secure, high-performance, sandboxed separation. There's probably going to be some performance penalty relative to being able to work directly into CephFS or directly into NFS, but until somebody writes those, we'll have to live with that, but it'll still be a lot better. And it will scale a lot than any kind of NFS gateway thing we have now, because we have to run those under pacemaker control. We run them centralized, whereas this could be distributed out to every compute node. So the proposal is that we model this on the sender model, where we use a library that Nova and the storage component, in our case Manila instead of sender, share, that has information, connection info, and sender's terminology about how to mount the shares. So that's how Nova would know how to mount a SubFS or NFS share or SIP share, HDFS if somebody brings it in, whatever that Manila has, right? It would be a new type of connection. So you would get the basically your export location and protocol information, everything you need in order to mount to the compute node via what I'm in this document calling an OS shared library, like Sender's OS brick library. And then when a user boots a VM with a Manila share or attaches a Manila share to a guest, Nova would use that library to get the connection details, mount to a staging location, and start a VirtIO-FS for exposing the mounted share to the guest. The VirtIO-FS listens to a socket path where the guest rendezvous with it. So it's got to be unique for that guest. And it uses a staging mount point, as I indicated. It could, as far as VirtIO-FS is concerned, it doesn't care if there's a remote file system or a local one that it's sharing. So I gave an example of running the VirtIO-FS, and I just put a $guest in there to get the concept that you want a unique socket path and unique source path in here per guest. So if you look at line 46 in the Etherpad, that's what you do. Then when Nova boots up a guest, it basically, if you've used libvirt, it's like you do a virsh define for the domain that you're going to boot up, and then you do a virsh start referencing that in virsh terms domain, and it's all specified in XML. And there are three kinds of things that have to happen. You have to specify some memory backing. I've shown the shared one here. There's a huge pages option. There's that memory gets associated with a NUMA topology. So you pick the CPUs that the guester is going to use and hook it up with that memory. And then the critical thing is you add a VirtIO-FS file system. And that's a new thing that was not supported until recently. So you can have all kinds of devices, PCI devices and so on, like block devices and graphics devices and so on in the definition. And you can see here that you can have a file system type and it's a mountable file system, and the driver type is VirtIO-FS, which is the new one. And that source directory that was referenced in the VirtIO-FS is also occurs here. And then a new thing is you specify a target dir. And the dir is because most of them are directories, but all this is a tag. So I called it myFS in this example. And the tag, we want the tags to be consistent even if the VM gets migrated or reincarnated in some way on a different node. So my thought is we probably carry that in the connection details, and Manila sets that and treats it as part of an export location. When you do that and you boot up the guest, then the guest uses a pretty simple syntax. If you look at line 75 on the Etherpad, it's saying I'm using a VirtIO-FS type mount, and I'm using that tag myFS, which is referencing back to the source. And here in this case, I'm mounting it on /MNT, mount it wherever you want. So for full mount automation, guests would need to stick something in their FS tab or run auto mount or something like that. But it gets you a lot further towards that because now this is possible and it's discoverable from the guest. I put under here under alternatives, when I first started thinking about this, as Gautam's probably chuckling to himself, but I was thinking, I I was scared, and I am candidly still somewhat scared about the amount of changes this is going to imply to Nova. So I was trying to think about a way to do this work in Manila itself without impacting Nova as much as we could. So one alternative would be to run something, I was calling it a Manila agent on each compute node. And the Manila Share Service would send an RPC to it saying, hey, do that staging mount on the compute node. And I was imagining that would get driven off of an access allow. And then you'd still need to call into Nova to actually do the VirtIO-FS exposure. This approach would reduce the amount of work needed in Nova, but the user experience doesn't match block device APIs. Nova people and probably a lot of other people aren't going to want another agent running on compute nodes. Neutron agents run there, but basically otherwise they're owned by Nova. And it still requires a brand new API to call into Nova to get the VirtIO-FS file system exposed. So in terms of reducing the sales job and complexity to Nova, you got to sell them a brand new API. So it's not clear that it's that much of a win anyway. I've started sketching out the kinds of things one puts in a spec below. This is all basically areas for research. And I thought I would, when we go, we'll show the Nova people this as well. And they can help correct. But basically Nova has something called a block device mapping that shows up in a whole bunch of different layers. I've started mapping, using the word out. I've started to sketch out my own understanding of the research of this, but it's used in the API and scheduler. There's one kind of data structure where you, when you say you want to boot or attach block devices, there's some validation and interaction with the database at that point. And there's ultimately a table in the database called the block device mapping, and it gets mirrored in database. That database schema gets mirrored in various kind of middle level objects. And then there's a virt driver. So drivers for Nova are virtualization drivers. So there's a libvirt driver, and the block device mapping shows up down there as well. And part of what we want to find out, I think, is can we, if we ignore the name of block device mapping for a moment, is it suitable to use it for shares, file shares as well? And with Nova, and by the way, there I say file shares, Nova might conceivably want to use VirtIO-FS itself. They could even use it for local volumes. So let's just say for files, we have talked this through with them. Would they want us to use the same data model, modulo name, or create a new one that's similar to it? Similarly, for the REST API, can we use the existing APIs with some microversions and tweaks? Or do we need new APIs? How do we, they already have this problem, but we need to know how they handle in APIs, knobs and features that work with some virtualization backends and not others, since this would work only for libvirt. So I have stuff about the advantages of the security that we've kind of already talked about. A big area of investigation would be migration. And from talking to David Gilbert on the VirtIO-FS stuff, they actually want to do some work at libvirt itself for VirtIO-FS. I said, well, look, this is just a file system. Can't Nova handle it on its own? It can migrate VMs that have all kinds of file systems attached to them without having to do anything special for that file system. You don't go make changes to ext4 just so that Nova can use it. And he said, yeah, but this is a file system that is sharing stuff with its host. That's what's unique. And we need to do some things there to support migration. So we're going to file an RFE for that with the libvirt people. I haven't done it quite yet, but it would be like next week. I don't want people to say wait till that's done to start on this, because I think we can do this in parallel. There's stuff on performance, deployer impact, the implementation question of to what extent we can reuse existing data structures and workflows and tweak them versus having to do stuff new. I've listed various work items from the OS Share library and the API extensions, database, RPC, similar stuff that you would have in Manila, but most of it's going to be over in Nova. Similarly for doc impact, testing impact. So I'm just trying to catalog these things that we have to do. This would be a multi-cycle project, and we just want to get started, get our foot in the door, and also work on it aggressively. Saying it's multi-cycle doesn't mean I want it to go forever. I don't want it to be like Sender multi-attach, which took, I think, about 5 cycles and got abandoned and restarted and so on. At the bottom here, how are we doing on time, Gautam?
You can take 10 more minutes, I think.
We have 10 more minutes. Okay. So yep. I may get we're going to talk with Nova on Thursday. If I might get a ASCII cast or something of this by then. But basically, what I've done is you do this manually, do the steps that we talked about above manually, in the sense that you log into a host that's acting the role of a compute node, and you boot up a guest from a libvirt definition in it. So the way I did it first was just to use Virtual Machine Manager to boot a Fedora 32 guest on a Fedora 33 host. And by the way, Fedora 33 is out today, so that was candidate. I needed Fedora 33 rather than Fedora 32 to get a new enough version of the Virsh editor that it would actually handle the device configuration that we talked about. So these are the XML things we talked about earlier. And if you see at line 300 or so, I had a source directory from the host called home tbarren shared, and the tag, their target tier here is my FS. And then at line 312 on the host, I'm running VirtIO-FSD. I'm giving it a socket path. I just used a not very unique name because I was just doing one of them. And I referenced that source directory. And if you run it with -d, it'll sit there and run in the foreground, and you can see it log stuff as it goes forward. But then you need to use another window, log into the guest VM, and use that simple mount command at line 320. And then when you do that, you can do all the usual stuff you do, list and read files, create a new file, go up to the host or boot up another guest and do the same thing and see the file elsewhere. Then after doing that, what I did was make a subdirectory under that VirtIO-FS shared directory and do a remote mount onto it. And that's just to illustrate that you can. You could also do it at the top. And this would be a design point of, do we want to share for a given guest? Do we want to have one VirtIO share from host to guest, at which you can do multiple remote shares underneath it. That has some economy advantages, but we would need to see, does it have performance? You know, you'd be sharing the same VirtIO shared memory connection to the host rather than doing one for each share. So, you know, maybe eventually that's an option depending whether you want performance or to economize on the use of shared memory. It's just nice that you have the flexibility. And it shows that VirtIO-FS doesn't really care. It's just sharing whatever it sees. So I'm running on, but there's going to be a talk with the NOVA people on this on Thursday. Any suggestions and thoughts you have or objections? Objections you can present even after Thursday, of course, but the earlier the better on any of this. So I'd appreciate any thoughts or help or you guys might have.
Just
Questions, thoughts now?
another part about testing. I mean, this should be available on the latest Ubuntu, right? The Ubuntu 2004. We haven't tested it ourselves, but
the kernel is right for the guest. The libvirt packages and QEMU packages, when I tried them out, I needed to use a host that was 20.10.
okay, the latest
yeah.
one.
So in all these cases, sometimes there are, first of all, in some cases I might have done something wrong, but when I tested this a little bit, I saw that some of the reports were a little bit optimistic, and I think based in some cases on the fact that a kernel was new enough, or somebody had compiled a libvirt with that version and it worked fine. But actually what was packaged or available to me in the channels I had didn't get things as up to date. But it's all happening, and it's happening very quickly. So if this is going to be a, you know, take a couple of cycles to actually get ready and have libvirt working and everything, I think all the software is going to land in Ubuntu and everything else. Ceros didn't have a new enough kernel to work as a guest yet. And I started looking at making one and got stuck in build root land. There may be a reason they haven't updated to the newest kernel yet, but I booted whatchamacallit, the Alpine as a guest, and it worked just fine, the latest Alpine, which is a very small Ceros size type. It's about the same size as a 64-bit base Ceros. So I can update with my findings on, thank you for writing these. I've got a document where I did a variety of combinations. But for testing, it will be interesting to find that out. I've also not tested yet with nested libvirt, which would be for scenario testing and gate. You would probably want a host that's itself a VM that has VM guests. It's one of those why wouldn't it work type things, but maybe it does, maybe it doesn't. So there's a bunch of things we need to check. As you can see, I'm excited about the topic because I talk too much. I ask for questions and then I talk.
That's really cool. I mean, we should probably allow people to digest this, and I'm sure there's going to be more questions during the Thursday's session with Nova. But, you know, Tom's always accessible to answer these questions. Is there anybody that has one right away?
So I do, but maybe we need to wait until we talk with the Nova folks. But how, like, do we have an idea on how this is going to be implemented? Like, which are going to be the different stages in which we are going to be working to deliver this feature?
What I would like is for us to be able to deal with what I think is the hard part early, and that is the database tables and API. The libvirt definition part seems to me relatively easy. That's because I can do it by hand, and I can see how Nova constructs XML for libvirt machines. The spawning of a VirtIO-FS daemon per tenant seems to me relatively easy. There's a question of, do you do it in a container, which container you do it in, if you're a deployer, that type of thing. I'll just say there's a libvirt container and our distribution that stacks up a whole bunch of processes. So it probably fits there. And the OS share stuff will be important, but I feel like it's something that's doable, that we can see, you know, the end of the tunnel on what that would be like just from the sender model. What I don't know is whether we can use the block device mapping data structures more or less as they are, and use the block attach, detach, and BDM for boot APIs more or less as they are. And that seems to me the first area of real research. And if we can do that and potentially make changes there with, you know, micro version protection, so everything is backwards compatible in a way that this is still sort of a tech preview work in progress thing, that would be awesome for enabling the rest of the development. So I'd like to find out about, investigate that and drive an answer on that as a first step. But this is just I'm very open to different thoughts on project planning on this. I think the Manila side is, if we do it this way, is not going to require much. Does that make sense on the Manila side? I mean, when we create a share, we specify a file protocol today, a sharing protocol. And we would presumably be able to create a share of type SFFS, for example, but with a VirtIO-FS share protocol. So we had to figure out how we, you know, signal that kind of thing. There's potential, as we've discussed, for having multiple protocols with the same share backend in a way that makes sense.
The way I see it, even after I mean diving in this deep with you, Tom, is we have all of the parts that are that you've called out so far already ready. In the sense, yeah, I mean, I know there could be another area of exploration where we can add VirtIO-FS as a first-party protocol in Manila itself. That way, we can make some changes to the API specifically around VirtIO-FS that may not be what we need for other protocols. But if you were to use this as generic as it is today, that is, create a share for X protocol, and you're going to get an export location right off the API. So the connection information is given to you in the same way as the rest of the share metadata. So yeah, the folder names and such, maybe that's something that the source mount point names and such, that is something we could think about and see whether our current metadata system cannot handle that.
Yeah, we
And if
might
there
be able to do it
needs,
from have Manila be authoritative and provide metadata, or maybe there's just some convention, some rule that can be used. So it's done consistently. I mean, that would be an area of research. If the second were possible, that would be ideal because you don't have to communicate it at all. Everybody just knows how to, how to build it. But yes, I see what you're saying. We could probably use metadata that we have so we don't have to change Manila in order to support it.
right. And I mean, there is work to improve the metadata stuff that I'll be talking about tomorrow. Maybe if it makes sense, we can make changes to that proposal. Because I do want to propose adding immutable metadata. So there's that. I know it kind of, but I'll explain. Uh, that could be something else that
Cool.
we can consider. All right. Any further questions on this? Any other concerns? If not, let's just take a quick 5-minute break and then get back. And when we do that, we'll be talking to Douglas about share server, share network updates or share server updates. Haven't we done this before? Anyway, so 5 minutes, everyone, and we'll be back in the room with Douglas. Thank you. Recording. All right. Thanks for joining us back again. So we're talking to Douglas about share server update. So Douglas, it's all yours now.
Thank you. Uh, I don't think that we will spend that for 5 minutes on this one. The idea behind this topic is just to do some review on a workflow that we intend to implement for features that are going to implement it in this cycle and the next ones. But the main problem that we have today is that some resources that are associated with share servers can't be updated due to already deployed share server. This means that if I want to update an attribute from a security service, or if I want to change something on the share network, this will be blocked by Manila because currently we do not support updating the share servers that are already created in the backends. So based on that, we were thinking on a workflow in order to implement a way of updating these share servers with these new attributes. And it seems that this can be used for different operations and can be even, as if we think that's correct, can be even a single call to the driver. So the problem that we have today is that this resource can be updated if they are in use. And we were thinking about how this update can be triggered in the backend. So this is a proposal for a workflow that we plan to work during the Wallaby cycle. And the idea behind that is that first thing is that we are going to do some initial validations. So, for example, if the administrator wants to update the security service and change some attribute like a password for an authentication server, first thing that we are going to do on this modification is to validate all those parameters and see if they are valid, and start doing the process of checking if there are some shared servers that are affected by these changes. So first thing that we're going to do is to check their status. So we'll read all the shared servers on the database and see if those that are affected are healthy or not. And and also check if its resources are healthy or not. And also we are going to check if the share servers support this kind of capability. So with this modification, we also intended to add new capabilities to share servers. So um, for each release that we provide a new share server update operation, the idea is to add also in the share server a new capability that will say if this share server can be updated or not, and will tell us if a share server can be updated or not. Are the backend drivers, and this is something that it's important to have because on the API we can validate if the share server can be updated or not and fail earlier. So we can just deny the operation if at least one share server will not support this kind of updates. So this is a generic approach that might work for many share server updates, and something that was discussed in the past PTG, and we intend to continue with this idea. And this is what we think that might be done in the API before actually calling the share service to update the share server, update each share server. So this is the start of the share server update, and the next thing to do is to actually call the resource to be updated. But the first thing we are going to do is start updating the status of the share server. The idea is to block the share server for receiving any new operation, and also uh, block any resource that's part of the share server of being updated, of being modified during these updates. So one thing that we were thinking at this moment is uh, beside just changing share server status, also change all shares status, because first thing is that we don't want users to deleting or changing anything in the shares, because depending on the share server update, we can have new export location, for example. This will change how the share uh, is presented to the user. So the idea is to block that. And also by changing the share status, we also, users will be able to identify that there is an operation happening in the backend, and this share is blocked for any further operations. Um, Basically, this will be done still in the API before calling RPCs to the share service to actually update the share servers. So at this point, we know that all status are healthy, all share servers support the requested operation, and now we are moving share server status and share status to a new state, or even we can use a state that we already have on Manila. But probably we are going to create a new state for that. And what we are going to do is the last thing we are going to do is to call, is to trigger the IPCs to the respective Manila share service in order to update these share servers. One thing that is important to clarify here is that after this point that we trigger all the RPCs to update the share servers, we do not intend to roll back the change on the resource. For example, if the user requested to update a password in a security service, and everything was validated, and we triggered those RPCs to different backends, I don't think that we can roll back these anymore because some share servers might be successful on updating these parameters and other may fail. So at this point, the update on the resource, on the security servers or in the share network was made. And 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 now from this point, share servers will start to be updated. And if one into failure or fail to update, the idea is that we should handle this as a corner case, a separate case where we need to fix that share server in order uh, to be compliance with the new configuration on the security service, for example. So uh, by by receiving this operation on the share manager, uh, the thing that we are going to do is just is to call a driver in a new driver interface to update that security, update that share server. So the share manager in this scenario can receive a list of share server IDs and trigger for each share server update operation. And this update operation will provide the new network and new security service attributes in order to the backend driver that support this operation to update the share server. And we have here two scenarios. The success scenario that everything went okay. We plan to update everything back to active and available, so our resource get back to the initial state. And depending on the operation, we might have some updates to the shares, like the sport location case, that adding a new network location to a existing share server also can trigger can provide new export locations for those IPs. So this is the success scenario, and the failure one that we uh, we are we plan to treat as an error state. The idea is to send the share server to an error, so we don't know which status will be at the backend driver in the backend itself in the storage. So the idea is just set the share server to an error state and call for the admin intervention to see what will be the next stage on that, because the security service or the network allocation in the database might be pointing to some state, and this specific share server in the storage is not aligned with what we have in the database. So the idea here is to change, in the case of the failures, change everything to an error and let the admin know that we need some kind of intervention to fix that, because I believe that at this point we can do nothing about that, and there is no way of rollback all the other share servers that might be already updated with any configuration. After the administrator fixing any case of failures, we still can rely on the admin to reset all the states to active and available again after everything is fixed on the storage. And this is the failure scenario that we are thinking to handle. And regarding the drivers itself, the idea behind the capability is that the driver will report these update capabilities, and we can also use the scheduler to filter backends that have those capabilities. This is an option for the admin that choose to create a share on a backend with specific capability. And also we expect the drivers to implement this new driver interface that at this point it's a generic driver interface for updating share servers that are already created on the backend. Do you guys have questions about this workflow that makes sense? There are something that we are missing.
Yeah, I have a noob question from the very start of this, right? I know we've discussed this in the past with something else, and I've not seen your latest spec. So maybe the answer is go read the spec. But I'm a little confused when you started saying that you want to be able to update security services and you want to be able to add or remove subnets from an existing share network. And so these operations should be triggering share server updates.
Yeah, they might share the same workflow, but they are different operations, and we tend to implement different operations in different phases.
Mm-hmm.
But this is something that I see as a common workflow, because in the end they will all of them will trigger an update on the share server in each storage.
So and this whole aspect of fan out updates, right? That's what is a little concerning, specifically because you have a controlling resource that the user is aware of, which is a share network. But all of this is not exposed to the users, right? You're saying this is going to be built in as an admin API interface.
Yeah, probably.
Okay, so users are not going to have access to this feature of updating uh, share networks like this or security services.
Yeah, at this
And
point, yes.
so what is this new Manila manage command though?
This is for admin only also. This is something that we were discussing in the past PTG. It's a way of uh, setting these capabilities, share server capabilities for already deployed share servers. So what might happen is that when the admin upgrade Manila with this new feature,
Mm-hmm.
all share server
Oh yeah,
we have this capability set to a false value,
yeah.
and we are not automatically update these field depending on the driver that this share server is created on. So we will give these Manila command so admin can change these kind of capabilities and other share server parameters
Yeah.
in order to have these capabilities on already created share servers.
Okay, so this is just a way to directly update the database as they're capable of doing this with hosts and other things today. So okay, so I was a little confused whether this whole API is implemented via Manila manage. So that's not the case. Thanks
Yeah.
for the clarification. The further question that I had was, if this is an admin operation and admins have access to share servers, so is it possible for you to atomize this update itself, like try to make this happen at a smaller level? This is since this is some sort of a maintenance operation that the administrator is privy to, which is okay. So subnets are changing, or the security service attributes are changing. Is it possible for us to allow them to make a new security service and associate it with an existing share server one by one, um, and then remove the previous security service? Is that a possibility? I don't know. I'm just trying to ask if if you can break this operation down, you don't have this scary situation of somebody thinking a rollback has to be implemented for this, otherwise the scope of this operation is too big. We're affecting all share servers associated with the share network. While I say that, I do realize that a share network at most may have uh, 2 or 3 share servers, and this may not be such a huge problem. But since this is an admin operation, would it not make sense that since they have access to the share servers to trigger updates for each share server? Is that going to prevent something?
So the idea is to have they still use the same share server and they still use the same share network, but they trigger the update for each share server, affected share server.
Yeah, so I mean, I'm thinking of it like this. Okay, so Ironic has a similar situation with bare metal nodes. So before they kick off something to do with a bare metal node, they go ahead and set a maintenance state on it, such that nothing else can capture that bare metal node to do anything else, right? So and then you then perform your maintenance on that bare metal node and then release it. So a similar thing to this, where you would maybe go set a bunch of share servers as, okay, we are now going to perform some maintenance on this, and I'm going to perform the maintenance one by one, trigger the updates for each share server one at a time, and operate at a share server level, not at the share network or the share security service level, because those are one to many.
Yeah.
So you would still create a new security service or a new share network subnet, and you would say, hey, share server, you're now being updated. I mean, the driver is going to take the share server resource, perform whatever update. Let's say share network has changed, so all the network allocations are refreshed on the back end, or a security service has changed, so those parameters are tweaked on the back end.
I see. It's a good idea that I need to process, but might make sense. So I can create a single new security service and link them to a list of share servers for later update them. But I don't need to create a single security service for each share server, right? Because if I need to create a single security service for each share server, I think that it might be
No, yeah, you're right.
not feasible to do that. But
Yeah, security services are meant to be with share networks, and a share network can span many share servers. So yeah, you would create a new security service. As an administrator, you can now modify the share network and attach this new security service. But then you would then go to each share server and perform your update in a rolling fashion. We're going to deal with this atomically in the API. We're going to talk to the share service that is responsible for that specific share server,
yeah,
and perform the update for that set of resources, and not a fan out. I know it is administrative burden at this point, but I mean, think of the other case, right? So some successes, some failures. That seems scary to me, at least.
okay.
Sorry,
In
Maurice was saying something.
Yeah, I brought this up initially. I asked NetApp to implement this for us.
Mhm.
I would like to see this be an end user feature. So really to be something that an end user can do who has no access to share service, to someone that only sees the security service. And now I think, yeah, if it ends up being implemented like you propose, I would have to write a wrapper or something that takes care for my end users.
Okay, so in the case of security service, would be possible, but users might not know that the share server and the backend support those capabilities, but at the end, he will receive an error message saying that it's not possible to do.
Yeah, as an administrator, I would like to be only involved if there is an error.
Yeah.
So I would hope that only one of 100 cases goes into error and the others just work, and I have no administrative burden.
I see that point, but how often are users updating their security services?
I don't really know.
Yeah. Because the problem with doing this is because there's so many different things. Like I said, like we're talking about a security service that is possibly associated with multiple share networks, and you would like to trigger that security service update that triggers multiple share networks, which triggers multiple share server updates, which might in turn have X number of shares. So for Manila to drive something like that will require like a lot of bookkeeping um, to make sure that nothing goes wrong through the process. That is where like I'm trying to get stuck on. I mean that I'm stuck on, and I want, like, if we can break down this problem of, okay, so users need to be able to update their security services, and is there some way to trigger like a more atomic update than trying to, this will set off this tree of updates, which might take a while. There might be problems with sending notifications back to users as to whether that update has happened or not, and some of their users are not have not updated, and they have no control of which one gets updated first, uh, or when in this process.
Yeah, I still can think on a more atomic way of doing that. But at the end, the idea was, at the initial idea was always to update the resource, like the security service, and get all the share servers updated. But of course, that we can have some issues with that. Some of them might fail, and in this case, we for sure will need the admin intervention to fixing that. Um,
How about this then? We allow backends to declare capabilities, a capability whether security services can be updated, and you create shares using a share type that wants this capability, and then we set that capability on the network itself. And that means that now you can end users know that the network can be modified, the security service can be modified, for instance. And then when they're making a modification to the security service, they are targeting a shared network. So you're reducing the attack surface. They're not, they have to create a new security service. They cannot modify an existing security service. And they need to take this new security service and attach it to this existing share network. So if they own multiple ones of these, then they will have to do this one at a time to their share networks. Because the unit of having access to modify your security service still, feels very alien, because you have the ability to just say, okay, this AD serves this network and this network and this network and this network. And to be able to modify it in place sounds scary. And it feels like a maintenance thing rather than a thing that I would do every day, still to me.
yeah, and we still can think of that some attributes might change how the authentication server is contacted,
Exactly, yeah.
and may disrupt some access.
Yeah, and the point being, I mean, if they were to go wrong with the update, make a update the password incorrectly or something, there's no way to convey that back to the user until we hit the driver and we perform a bunch of checks, etc. And secondly, I'm sure there's going to be different implementations for this. Let's say NetApp can handle modifications in place and reconcile all of the access rules that have already been applied via the Kerberos system or the Active Directory. But let's say EMC storage systems can't do that. They can't handle the access rule changes, but they can modify the share server to go point to a different access domain. They can't migrate the access rules over to this new domain. There might be issues like that as well.
Yeah, this is some granularity that we still don't know how to solve unless we block some kind of attributes of being updated in the API layer. And we just provide the ability to update some kind of specific attributes like a DNS. You can add a DNS, or you can just update the password.
Yeah, that's true.
That might not break anything in the access rules.
So if we were to think about share network modification,
yeah,
in the same way, rather than share server security service modification, that would be one suggestion. I mean, I know because you'll have to think deeper about all the use cases that you currently have listed, and these things maybe which attributes to be modified, which attributes are modifiable and which are not, etc. And a generic assumption that can be made versus, hey, this is something that app can do versus some of the storage kind of thing. That would be one thing, one feedback for this whole approach. I am not stuck on the aspect of saying this is an administrator API versus a user API. If that's what if we want to let users have control to this, I'm not terribly afraid that they're going to break something. The what I am shooting for is that we don't have these mechanisms where we're going to go update a lot of resources at once. If we I'm sure we're going to have pitfalls with respect to that. So if we can granularize that, who has access to update this doesn't concern me as much. I try to put it at the share server granularity, hoping that this would be a administrator thing. But if it has to be at a share network level and a few share servers that are associated with the share network, it's not the end of the day. It's a much simpler implementation than saying this is getting updated at the security service level, where there are a lot of share networks possibly, and a lot of share servers associated with those. So approach it a little more granularly would be a suggestion.
Yeah, we can think about it, but we will still pursue uh, the user being updated the security service,
Mhm.
and let's see if at least we can take a way of avoiding too many resource updates at the same time and avoid issues like a lot of share servers went into error states. But at this moment, this is the only workflow and that we can think about it for solving this issue.
And a way to avoid errors could also be validation. We've implemented that with migration. So yeah, a check prior to an update, and if it's a user-based check, hey, I'm trying to update my security service password. Is this going to work? You're not forced to use that check, but you would do that as a a good measure of, I mean, a good practice.
Yeah.
I just have a point to reinforce what Gotham said. If we do one by one, doing by batch is just about creating scripts from the user. So if you do by batch, we can do one by one. So it seems that one by one is more flexible than doing by batch. Like Manila, if I want to delete all shares, I can delete a share server. I must delete one by one. And if I create, for instance, a share with, from the same type, with the same size, and I want to increase both of them, I can increase just the type and trigger. I must increase it one by one. So it's safer.
But
Seems safer.
the main issue by trigger one by one is that users don't have the vision of share servers, only admins. So the user can trigger anything related to a share server that will be at one by one. User, the idea is that user is updating the security server and the backend, everything is happening, and the user don't know what's happening, don't know how many share servers are being affected, and so on.
Yeah.
But
I know.
if we move this to an admin operation, then this approach can be done. But
For sure.
at this moment, we are trying to see if a user can update the security service and have everything updated in the backend. Thank you.
Yeah. Any other feedback, concerns? Douglas already updated his spec for this. Of course, we can take this to the spec review. And Douglas,
This
you might.
spec,
Mhm.
this spec is only for updating security service, and we will probably going to propose new specs for including new security service to an already used share network, and later adding a spec for adding a new subnet to already used share networks and so on. But all these specs, they rely on the share server being updated in the backend. And in this spec, I think that I'm proposing some kind of similar workflow. So if we agree on a different operation, a different approach, we'll probably update this spec. Any new thoughts or feedbacks? Please comment on the spec so we can continue to discuss. Okay, I don't think that I have anything else to add. At the end of the Etherpad, I was adding uh, the the updates that we are planning to work on this cycle on the next one that are associated with security service and share networks. One of them is to include new subnets to an existing share network, including add more than one subnet per AZ, which means that it will impact on how many IP addresses were allocated for a specific share server. So this is the update that we are expecting by modifying the subnets of a share network.
Great. And the spec that we're seeing up there is just for this first portion.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. Yeah, and I mean the suggestion would be whatever we're doing for Wallaby. I mean I like that you're bringing the full picture in, but specifically for whatever we're doing in Wallaby, we take the time to review
Yeah.
the spec, um, as well as keep in mind that Douglas is targeting all of these other portions as well, whether that happens in Wallaby or not.
Sure. I will try to make you guys updated about that in the IRC meetings, and so we can target to review those back first, and let the other ones for the more close to the deadline.
Great. Awesome. So if there's any further feedback, please take it to the spec. We will now move on. Do we think we need a break, or are we ready to move on to the next topic?
I think that we can move on.
All right. Yeah, let's do that. Let's just finish this day with this topic. There was something else planned, but I'm going to move that around to tomorrow. And we will get started now with share anti-affinity. So Maurice is here to talk to us about it. We might run over. We just have 10 minutes on the schedule, but the room is ours. So please feel free to drop off in case you have other engagements, but I hope you stay to give Maurice feedback as well. Maurice, it's all yours.
Okay. Yeah, I also created an Etherpad for this. If you can bring this up, please. Yeah, perfect. Yeah, I wanted to bring anti-affinity for shares to the table because I have a request, or my customers are asking for that. Just a definition of what I mean with that. So what's the use case? Imagine I have multiple share backend hosts in one availability zone, and I want to make sure that if I create a second share, then I don't want to land it on the same host like the first share. So that's anti-affinity for me. And what I get out of this is I get more protection against backend host failures, and that's what my users want to do, and they don't want to use a different availability zone or a different region because of the of other limitations, because of network limitations. They want to be local to where they mount their shares. So that's the use case for the anti-affinity. And I think when we're talking about anti-affinity, we can automatically talk about affinity at the same time, because there are also use cases for that. So for explicitly wanting to that my share ends up on the same host like an other share. Yeah, for whatever reason, because I want to group them in the layer above in the application, or if I care for saving space because I have similar data and I want to have my creation easier or something like that. So there could be more use cases here. And what I propose as a solution to have anti-affinity is the same like what Cinder already has. So there are affinity and anti-affinity filters and the scheduler that react on scheduler hints that you specify when you create a share. So imagine I have share A and I create share B, then I would send a scheduler hint on the creation of share B with it that says, I want to be not on the same host if possible, like share A.
So I have a question here. So the way you do this is you've created share A and you would set some sort of an extra spec in share B's share type to get this sort of anti-affinity?
No, that would be another possible solution. That would be what I have here as alternative solution custom B, maybe. The way that Cinder does, it, is you give a scheduler hint on creation. So that's something we currently not have in Manila, but yeah, we would have to implement with that. Yeah.
Is there any other use case for these scheduler hints besides affinity and such?
In Nova, you can explicitly ask for a host. That's what I know.
Okay.
So if you, but you have to be an admin for that, so that you can say, I want that my share lands on that host. Usually it's abstracted away via availability zones.
Agreed. So
that's also one of the questions I put in here. So do we necessarily need to expose the hosts to the end users by that, or I don't think this has to be the case, but it would make the life a little bit easier for the end users so that they could see, well, yeah, they are indeed on a different host, like I asked.
that would be the verification aspect, right? So what I kind of see Cinder taking the path is, I mean, I haven't used this feature in Cinder at all. I didn't know this existed. That they have a top level hint thing that can be used on share creation, that they just have keywords like same host and different host. So the host is still not exposed to the end users. They just have to believe that Cinder is doing the right thing and putting it on the same host or a different host.
Yeah.
Okay. I see. And it's a list as well. Interesting. I certainly see the use case for this. And I am, I mean, I don't like that we have yet another thing to add to this creation aspect, if that's the only stuff. But like you said, if we have to make extra spec changes, then we can't really share the share type between these two shares. So we'll be forcing the end users to use a different share type, and share type extra specs can't be set by end users. They'd have to be set by administrators. So an admin has to be involved to go say, okay, I want this share type to lead this share to the same host as this other share, or I want them to lead it away from this this host. So it's not the same.
Yeah, conceptually, it doesn't seem like a type, even though you could make a type affect the scheduler, of course. You know, that you and I can't be on the same plane because we're such important people. I'm joking. But, you know, it's not a characteristic of me that I have to be on a different plane. It's not my type. I'm just saying conceptually, you know what I mean? It's a policy that we have.
It's a one-time thing. It's not a direct, it's just a directive.
Yeah, you know, it's more of an external placement or scheduling constraint, but not, it's not my, you know, we're both belong to the type of very excellent human beings, you know, and that's very accidental. I mean, stupidly humorous about it, but
No, you're right. I mean, you brought the important point that this is a one-time scheduling hint. It is not a type that will have to. I mean, a type follows a volume wherever it is, right? Share wherever it is. So if you're trying to even migrate the share, if we don't want to change its type, that's what the share type attributes are copied onto this new share that we create. Uh, because that's what it means. And if we encode something like this into a share type, that's not desirable perhaps, because this is not something. I mean, if we were to actually have affinity this way, we already have a vehicle like share groups uh, that Maurice already pointed out. We don't have something for anti-affinity, and it's not a concern that I think people want through the life cycle of the share. They probably want this when the share is created.
Well, in the end, you want it through the life cycle, maybe, after all.
So how would
well,
this get preserved?
if I specify I want anti-affinity, then I trust that it stays this way. So that not one time in the future they are on the same host after all, and if the host goes down, I lose both.
yeah, but you're free to migrate it, and circumstances change, and you're free to migrate it over to different backends, right? Yeah, I mean, you change your mind.
Yeah, that's possible.
Whereas you really can't change the type of the share.
I mean, you can, but then it would. I mean, you can say I want to migrate it to a different share type.
Yeah, you can retype it to a different share type. I just mean, I'm not expressing myself well. Well, it's going to be on a different. If you don't change anything, they're going to be separated. So you get what persists in that sense, but it's not a constraint that would prevent you from migrating it to the same share later. But that seems fine. You wouldn't do that unless you had a reason to the same backend, I mean.
Yeah.
So is there any other way? So regions are too big. AZs seem to be too big as well, because we're now talking at a host level. So an AZ can span. I mean, multiple hosts can be in a single AZ.
If we had hierarchical AZs, then the unit case would cover it, but we really don't. And
yeah, that will also be a way of looking at it. Yeah, just
it
don't implement it and go away, use availability zones. And
yeah, I agree.
So there's one other, I mean, which is kind of what we went with replication. We created a new replication domain that can now be flexible, can span AZs, can be within a single AZ if they wanted, and stuff. So I wonder if we can represent backends in some way, but will that solve this problem? I don't know. I mean, then we might actually corner all of the shares into a backend unwantingly.
So Gautam,
Undesirably.
I think we might be able to invent a different solution, but I want to make a different suggestion. If what Sender did here is good enough for this problem, then I don't see why we wouldn't do it similarly. In other words, if there's not something wrong with it that we really object to and find objectionable, then I think having a common pattern for the user experience is worthwhile. I rather like the sender solution. I do not think it requires that you expose the actual backend to confirm. I mean, I don't think that's the contract, you know, that they can verify that you did the right thing. We implement it. If their administrator, if they think it's wrong, they go to their administrator and they raise a bug, you know, if we're doing it wrong. But in general, we should be able to do this and do it correctly. So I don't think we have to expose it. I think the solution's not terribly, it's relatively simple. I mean, the new filter is pretty simple.
Yeah.
I like simple.
But is this a vehicle we want to use for future things as well? The hints thing, I don't know. Is Cinder using it for anything else? Because I didn't think of this whole other category of scheduling requests for one. It's exciting. I was wondering if we had this question before. But maybe we can take that into a separate discussion. This spec as such makes sense. So would you be working on this, Maurice? And is that like planned for Wallaby? Is that your intention?
I try to see what I can do. Yeah, I'm not sure I can.
Okay. And
I'm not sure I have enough time, but yeah.
Since this modifies the API, I am kind of inclined to ask for a spec for this, so we can understand, you know, the interactions and such. And maybe a really simple spec could even just direct to what Cinder has and stuff, if they've already documented it and or implemented it as they had a spec at the time when they proposed this.
Yeah.
So we can take it from there, I guess. We can do code reviews on this and think of these other questions, answers to these other questions. But from what Tom says, and I tend to agree, is we at the end of the day do want to try for consistency between the storage projects. I don't know if that's a good thing or the bad thing, but it feels like a missing feature in this case, in those lines as well.
Gotham refrained from using the phrase cargo culting when I said that. Made my previous. Sometimes I say I argue for consistency, and he says, "Yeah, but you're just jumping over the same cliff as those guys." Usually he's right, but I would say other things being equal, right? You know, if we're not jumping off a cliff, and if it will work, those are important qualifications.
No, absolutely. And many a times we have refrained from doing what Cinder has done. And in this case, Cinder has done this 6 years ago, by the looks of this. So they might have some feedback for us, and I'd like to add some Cinder folks to the spec that you'll write, Maurice, and ask them how it's working for them. I know Winston was familiar with the Manila code at least. I know he doesn't work on OpenStack anymore, but maybe it's something we can ask some existing contributors in Cinder how it's working out for them. But shouldn't affect your requirement or your work at all. I'm just saying it is something that we would value in this space. Feedback from Cinder.
Yeah, it's also worth to find out what else they are using the scheduler hints for, maybe.
Yeah, that's a really good question. I'm glad Gotham asked that.
We don't have other extensions yet in Manila, right?
I wonder if we've asked the question with us.
This extension system at all.
No, yeah, exactly. So I kind of vaguely remember having a desire like this for scheduler hints. Maybe it was influenced by Manila CSI for Kubernetes workloads. I don't know. I'll have to rack my brain, and I'll probably comment on your spec uh, if I remember. But it has come up in the past, and we probably decided to end up using the extra specs mechanism, or we implemented something else like replication domain. Came up with a different solution than using this vehicle. And this is the sort of thing that I wasn't aware of at all from Cinder's perspective. Maybe they have not written good docs and or something, or I've just stepped out of the Cinder land for way too long.
Well, it reminds me a little bit of some of the conversations we've had about basically striping over resources versus packing. Using different distribution policies for placing on resources. I'm just going to say it reminds me of that. I don't have any more connection really.
Agreed. Okay. Any other feedback? Anyone else? We're 10 minutes over, and I'm sure it's too late in some time zones, so I don't want to keep people longer. If there's anything else, Maurice, at this point, I think the AI is to propose a spec for this. It can be as detailed or as short as you would like, and we'd iterate on that.
Yeah. Thanks for your input.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Let me just wrap up then. We are back in I keep forgetting, the Havana room. So bring out your cigars tomorrow at 1400 UTC. And we had one topic that missed the day, and that's what we're going to be starting with. And I'm actually probably okay with pushing that one, because I think we may be joined by folks in China tomorrow, especially that work on the Delhi MC backends. I hope, because this must concern them. If not, I mean, we're going to take good notes and record this whole meeting for.
Yeah, Gautam, I don't know that it needs 20 minutes. We'll see. But
okay. Yeah,
it was almost a retrospective type. I think I put it there, and then I had to jump to the other meeting. Sorry about that.
No problem. So we'll touch upon that tomorrow. But you please expect an update on all of today's items, possibly next week or something, in terms of the minutes. But I'll try to make the YouTube recording available. Thank you everyone for joining, and have a great rest of the day, or good night if it's the end of your day. And I hope to see you tomorrow at 1400 UTC.
Thanks. See you, Gautam.
Thank
Thanks.
Thank you, folks. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
See you.